Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today we have a very special Global Virtual Morning Report with an incredible guest, Dr. Laila. Dr. Laila, she's an IMG from Guatemala, and we're exploring her journey. This is part of a series of sessions that we do here at CP Solvers, trying to highlight IMG stories. So talking a little bit about Dr. Laila, Dr. Laila Woc-Colburn is an associate professor in the Division of Infectious Disease at Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta. She's a renowned medical educator and has a wide range of clinical interests, including tropical medicine, HIV, and fungal diseases. So thank you so much for coming, Dr. Laila.
Well, thank you for having me on a Saturday morning, afternoon, depending on your timeline.
So before moving on to questions, maybe this incredible team can introduce themselves. Why don't you go ahead first, Deborah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah. I'm from Brazil. I live in Argentina to study medicine. I live here for 7 years, and I'm excited to have Dr. Laila here. I always like the IMG stories because I think they have so much to tell us. And yeah, I think we can go for Marcela.
Thank you, Deborah. Hi, everyone. My name is Marcela. I am also from Brazil. I'm a doctor, graduated last year. I'm very excited for the interview today. Like Deborah said, I love the IMG stories, and this one is special because it's ID, and I love ID also, so very excited. Thank you. The next, I think it's Vale.
Thank you, Marcela. Hi, everyone. I'm Vale. I'm a medical student from Peru. I'm currently in Alabama doing an ID rotation. So I think that we have that in common with Dr. Laila. And I also just came back from Iran. So that's something that I really also enjoy that we have in common. Really excited to interview you today.
Incredible, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone for coming and for the incredible team that helped me to put this together. So at first, I would love if Dr. Laila could talk a little bit about her life in Guatemala. Like what do you miss the most? Favorite food and places to visit?
So yes, hi everybody. So I'm an Asian Latino. So that is one of the first questions I get here in the US is how come I speak Spanish? And then the second question I ask is like, oh, there are Chinese in Latin America. So we are. So that's one of the things that it's interesting. When I go to Guatemala, it is never questioned that I'm from there. So that's something you have to get used to. Sometimes you get those microaggressions, but you know, you have to be comfortable in your own skin. And so I usually say I'm an Asian Latino, and sometimes I get it from my patients, right? So they speak Spanish and notice. So what I miss from Guatemala is probably something in healthcare that I've noticed in the U.S. is the warmth that I had from my patients. You know, we do there's nothing wrong with the Caucasian or African-American patient in the US or the US patient, but they tend to be less warmth than our Hispanic or Latino culture, right? One thing I don't miss is that they don't call me all hours on my WhatsApp and asking me for consults, which they do in Guatemala. So there's the pros and the, but I miss the warmth and the camaraderie that I had in the hospital. I mean, I have a very good, very diverse, inclusive group here at Emory, but I do miss, like you have your coffee and then you go around. Things that are different is the timeline. Things are faster. So for example, you can take like a lunch and you take a lunch, right? It's not like 30 minutes. You actually sit down and think about things in life. What else? Probably the spontaneity. I mean, when I have to go see friends, I have to make an appointment instead of just driving by and stopping by to, let's do something. So that is different. It's a cultural difference. That's probably what I miss. There's things that I miss, like the volcanoes in Guatemala. Don't miss the traffic, and don't miss the pollution. But there's a lot of similarities. And people always think that the US has everything. And living here in the South, here in Georgia, you probably see it in Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, is that there is a huge huge inequity in healthcare. There's very rich and very poor. And the US healthcare system has a lot of issues and a lot of problems that doesn't get to our middle class and low income patients. And sometimes, for example, I had a patient that, I don't know why they decided to change their insurance, but they had a higher copay. And the copay for this antibiotic, which in the former insurance would have cost like $20 a week, was going to cost them like $1,000 a week, right? So the best thing is to admit the patient, which creates more healthcare costs. So we do have similar things, and even though that we don't think so. So the training that I had in Guatemala helped me a lot, especially to connect with my patients and how to deal with, low income, the social injustices and inequities that there is, Favorite food, so when I go to Guatemala, there's a couple of things that I enjoy. So there's a couple of places that I always hit. So I like, so there is a restaurant going up to the Highlands where they make this fresh tortillas. They have this incredible, it's near a place called Tecpan. So I stopped by there. And if I go to Antigua, which is where my family home is, I have a couple of restaurants that I go and have, like, there's kind of a mole called pepian that I like. And then there is, which is made out of pumpkin seeds, and it's like a stew. And then this time of the year is starting to get a little cold. So you get this incredible blue, purples and orange hues, which we call celajes. And so that's probably what I miss the most. And the friends, but we're now more closely community.
Great. Yeah, I'm already getting hungry listening all this.
Well, there's many more food, but it's gonna get hungry. And I'm not traveling to Guatemala until next week for a meeting, so I'll get my cravings taken care of.
And can you talk to us your journey before you come to US?
Yeah, so my journey is probably a little bit kind of similar to everybody, and there's things that are different. So one thing, so my mom is from Panama. So my grandfather worked in the Panama Canal. So opposed to a lot of people that have issues with getting, or challenges with the visas, because my mom was born in the Panama Canal, I got a residency out of her. So that made probably the journey easier, but still, I still had to go through, I did my med school in Guatemala. The med school at that time was 7 years instead of the 6, or 8 years instead of 6 now, something like that. And so one thing is that you learn everything in Spanish. So your medicine, you learn in Spanish. And the way we do our testing is very different as the multiple choice questions with the US is learned. So you have to learn how to answer multiple choice questions. And I think that's the hardest. The other part is that we rely in Latin America a lot on memorization. Even when we're in the wards, it's all about memorization and not critical thinking. So it's like, I mean, I don't know, might be a different experience in other countries, but like when I would do my rounds in the hospitals, I had to memorize all the labs, even though I could look at the labs and memorize the whole history, and then you would get penalized if things were wrong. So that was different. And so learning how to take multiple choice questions. So by now, you guys probably you folks have already understood that. In the multiple choice questions, until I started writing them, I quite didn't understand how they were, so it took me a while. So I finished medical school, and then when I finished medical school, I went into internal medicine in Guatemala. I didn't think about coming to the US. Actually, I was going to do my internal medicine in Guatemala. I got accepted in a residency. And then I wanted to do ID, and then I didn't think about the next step. But at that time I was doing bilingual translations for this organization, the Malta organization. And there were some Americans that came, and someone asked me, have you thought about taking the steps? And I'm like, no. So this is well, there was internet, but not a lot of internet. So I didn't take the Kaplan course. I got copies with another friend of mine of the USMLE books, and we did questions, so the Q bank, took the tests. Probably by today's standards, the grades weren't probably, the numbers weren't that good, but as I look at it as this way, it was good enough to get me into a residency, and at the end, it's what I needed. So then I applied while I was doing internal medicine in Guatemala City. And so I had to take, I had to figure out how to travel from Guatemala to the US, because I couldn't miss calls and things like that. So that was a little bit dicey. At that time you could interview and pre-match. So when I went to Chicago and I went to Advocate Illinois Masonic, I really had, had a good vibe about it, right? I walked in and I said, okay, I feel like home. I like this place. It wasn't too big. It was a nice, I liked Chicago. I liked the city. I could, kind of make my way. Illinois Masonic had a good HIV population. Their chairman at that time was a well-known ID person. So I was like, oh, this is good, right? For what I needed. And I liked the transition because I was coming from a very sheltered place. So you have to imagine this is 2003. So it's almost 20 years ago. In a sheltered place where I had no idea about IV, people living with drug usage. I had no idea. I mean, our drug usage in Guatemala was smelling glue. So I had that, any of that, or how can a survival of an AIDS patient be different, right? So I liked it because it was small. It was with the University of Illinois. It's a small hospital in the city, so it would be, I guess, instead of category A, it's a category B. The people was at a place I could actually grow and learn about the electronic medical record, which was epic. I didn't know that after that, I would have to go through several iterations of epic transitions. And there was a good Latino population. So I liked that. And they had some Latino residents, and so we could speak and things. So it was a very comfortable place for me to grow. And then when at the time it came to apply to ID, which is, compared to cardiology, GI, it's a less competitive, right? I wanted medicine, I didn't want surgery. So Dr. Shagran basically said, tell me where you want to go, and I will make one call, and that's where you're going to go. And that's how I matched at Case, right? And then at Case, I had a great training. I didn't like Cleveland. Sorry, it's too cold, and got seasonal affect disorders, things like that. And then I took the first academic position. I knew I wanted to do academics. I didn't like being private. No offense to the private doctors, it's just that I found it not brain stimulating. I needed something to keep me on my toes. I wanted to do medical education. I wanted to do mentoring, and I didn't see that on the private or in the industry. So I ended up in Baylor, and I was there from 2010 until 2020. So I was there for 10 years, and it was good. It was a place I could grow. And just like everything in life, it was a good place to grow. And then you outgrow the place and it's time to move. And that's when I moved to Emory in 2020. Little to my knowledge, I moved during the pandemic, which is not something I can tell anyone to do. First of all, because you move in 2020, you don't know anyone. So it has taken me 2 years, and probably has set me back 1 year on my promotion for full professor. But 1 year is not a biggie. It's something that you can make up. But it was difficult, the transition, the isolation and leaving the tribe. I think it was harder for me to move in 2020 to Emory than it was harder for me to leave Guatemala in 2003 and move to Chicago. And the reason is that when I moved to Chicago, we had an intern class that we started together. there was a group. We were all in the same little boat, right? When I moved here to Emory, it was just me. There was no little boat. So it's a little different. So I like the city in Chicago. It's a wonderful place, but again, too cold for my taste. And so that's my journey.
Oh, Dr. Woc-Colburn, that's very inspiring. Thank you so much for replying our question. And also like a follow-up question. What were the reasons that made you want to go to the USA?
So one of the reasons is one was being a woman in medicine. I knew that being a woman in medicine in Guatemala was going to be very difficult. I saw it with my classmates. I saw it with my colleagues, even my good friends today. Their personality changed. They became less empathetic. They became a little bitter. They're wonderful people, but there's always that kind of like, I could have done more. And I recently, when I was in Guatemala, just recently, for a talk in my alma mater about leadership, inclusive leadership, I sat down with my classmate, and she actually, it's the first time in 20 plus years that I heard that she regretted her decision of coming back. And she also didn't practice medicine, and she decided, so you make choices, but you don't want to live a life with regrets. So I knew as a woman in medicine, I wasn't going to be able to go up, which I've been allowed to do with certain challenges, because the glass ceiling here in the US is very thick. And if you're Latino and you're a woman, that's very thick. And if you're an IMG, you always are like, you always compare to the Harvards, right? And so there's always that little chip of that you have to make it. So in my case, I always had to prove myself. So the type A personality shines, and it's like you always wanted to do better. And probably that's also leads up to a little bit of a burnout, because you can't say no, because you want to make sure that you don't miss the opportunities. So, the other thing is, intellectually, I did not feel stimulated. So it's going to sound nerdy and it's going to sound weird, but I read a lot, and I still do. And I needed something to challenge my mind, which I found here. Like when I run with my medical students, when I run with my residents, there's always someone who read something or says, oh, Doc Woc, I just went home and I read this, or I learned about this. Did you know about this? And I, probably didn't. And so it's a nice way of keeping that. And that's not the way it was in Guatemala in the 2000s. It's still not even like that right now. You're not supposed to challenge your teacher. So they don't have a Socratic method. It's a very militarized. And so I didn't see myself fitting there. So I needed something to feel where I could grow. And so that's the reason. I didn't leave because I was threatened or anything like that. But if you could say, there was a mental abuse because my poor mind wasn't being used to its potential. Let's put it that way. And then as a woman in medicine, I would not be able to do what I'm doing here today if I hadn't left.
Thank you, Dr. Laila, for sharing that. I can definitely relate. Being here alone, it's very scary, and I'm definitely homesick. So I wanted to ask you if you had any highlight and maybe some bittersweet moment from your journey as an IMG that you would like to share with us.
Yeah, I think there are many. I have had the good fortune of having very strong allies, mentors, and sponsors. So I can tell you one time, I think the first time that I felt not well actually was during my residency, and it was actually from the program director, who at that time was someone who was from Mexican American background. So this is someone who was third generation Mexican American, and I did well. And the problem was that one of the patients who was from Argentina. I don't know if he passed away. we were rounding, and he basically told the attending that not to speak to him in Spanish because she could barely speak Spanish. So he wanted someone else to speak Spanish. So there was a little bit of a power struggle. So I got on the bad end of this attending, who happens to be the PD, right? And so just that was as an intern, and things just continued to do. I didn't pay too much attention to it because I was more focused, and I actually had very good allies. You know, I had the chair, and I had the ICU director, and I had everybody else who was like, you know, you're doing a great job. But it came to a complaint that she, you know, that she brought up. And basically we came to words, and one thing she says is that my problem was that I was an IMG and I was taking her place away because my parents were not cherry pickers. So my parents, yes, my parents went to university, and I'm very grateful for that. But I also know great people whose parents did not go to universities and are excellent, you know, physicians and persons, and have done. So that was the first thing. And I thought it was weird because, and I highlight this because it was a woman, and it was someone from the Latino community, right? So sometimes, so I learned that sometimes we meaning women and Latinas, and we can actually be obstacles for people to come up. Because in a position of power is where you can help, you can mentor and sponsor, right? And be a role model. But in this place, this person had very good emotional intelligence and whatever you want to call it, but instead of helping grow someone, was putting them down. Unfortunately or unfortunately, I have a very strong personality, and I owe that to my mom. And so I rallied my little allies, and that was it. And when I graduated, I got 3 of the top 4 honors, and she couldn't do anything else than to give it to me. So, and you know, there's karma. And so that one is a bit bittersweet, because I learned that just because someone is from your same ethnic group or your same gender, they're going to help you. They may actually put more obstacles and challenges for you because they had challenges, and so you should have challenges. And you might see that in Latin America, or at least in Guatemala, that happens a lot. It's just like if I got bitten by something, I should bit the other person. It just doesn't, you know, you don't learn the lesson. So that would be a bittersweet moment, Valeria. And after that, you know, I mean, I've had my ups and downs, but I said I'm very fortunate to have a very good group of friends, colleagues that I can talk to. Probably the next, you know, big highlight point moment was when I had to transition from Baylor to Emory. And that one was because, again, I was challenging someone for power. And this was the chair of medicine. And basically they gave me a mediocre evaluation. And I asked if I could go up on leadership, and they basically says, well, you have to look elsewhere. So when I talked to my friends in the ID world networking, I got interviews, and like Emory, I mean, I talked to this person, Wendy Armstrong, on like December the 8th, and I was interviewing at Emory on January 14th. And I actually, before I did my faculty presentation, I got an offer letter. I didn't take it because I had other places to go, but at the end, I knew I was going to take Emory because at the end, this is where I wanted to be. So things happen for a reason. You are going to have obstacles. You're going to have challenges. But if you surround yourself with people who can be allies and sponsors, you can move ahead. I mean, we all have hit rock bottom. There's no IMG who has not suffered throughout and has not thought about doing something else. But we rise up again and we do it because that's who we are. We're resilient, right?
Oh, so inspiring, Dr. Laila. And I'm so, so glad for you because you're in a place now where you have your allies, your sponsorship, a place that you can mentor so many people. And we can see from Dr. Laila's tweet that she's really, really an incredible mentor. She sponsors so many people. So incredible to have for you to have this kind of experience in a place that you can grow as the brilliant mentor that you are. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the struggles that you had to overcome during residency. Maybe talk about the language, the visa issues that you had, if you had any.
Yeah, so the language is, so there's the English that you learn and the English that is spoken. So when I moved to Chicago, the African American community speaks a thing called Ebonics, which is some Creole English weird patois thing, which I can never understand. So I've met my first patient, and you know, there were, before that, there were instances. For example, my first day as an engineer, I got stuck in the elevator. The elevator, you know, got stuck. Anyway, so I get there, and I got there early. I was there at 6:30, 6 o'clock. I was eager beaver. I was afraid. Like, I don't know the place. I mean, like anxiety. I like, I rounded the place several times. I still got lost. And to tell you the truth, now that I rounded at the university hospital, my first time in 2 years, I got lost, and I went there a whole week ahead to learn the place because I get nervous about the things, that I'm going to get stuck in somewhere and not be able to come out. So I get there, and it's in the oncology floor, and I get there early, and I said, I tell the nurses, oh, where are the things so I can draw blood? And they look at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, shouldn't I be drawing blood? Because that's what we did in Guatemala. You got there early, you had to line up all your little things and be the phlebotomist. You were the one who took the patient to, there was no patient transport. There was, at the VA now there's a phlebotomist, but before there wasn't. So, I didn't know that. Also, they know that the nurses put Foley's. And then my other thing was that and some places, and this is just tells you how Guatemala is so poor in things. We didn't had LP kits. So I read about this lumbar puncture kits, and you can measure IP, the pressure. I'm like, I have never seen a kit. Our kit was an AngioCAD of 18 gauge. Yes. Or, anyway, so you get that, so have this kid, and they're like, then there's waste, because we used to save all those things to recycle. And they're like, no, you have to throw it away. And you're like, okay. So it was weird. So I get to the African-American patient, and I say hello, and he's like, and I'm like, what? It's like, so I didn't understood. I couldn't, and to this day I still can't understand the Boston accent or the Bronx accent. It is very hard for me. Another one, if I had some Indian doctors, so from India, they speak very fast, and I couldn't figure out what they were saying, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, could you repeat that? So it has taken me a while, and now I'm better at it. Then I learned idioms, like there's still certain words. I'm very careful now about my pronouns, like like it's a he, it's a he, but in Spanish, there's always an issue. And then I learned things, so I had a patient who taught me everything on how to buy heroin, how to melt heroin, and how to shoot heroin. Because I didn't know this, and this guy had endocarditis. And so he's like, he's like, I'm like, I said, this is going to sound dumb, but I don't know how this is done. And he's like, oh, let me tell you. So you have to choose your dealer. And I'm like, okay. And the quality of the heroin. And I'm like, okay, this is probably more than I need to know. So that was it. And then with my HIV patients, I went to a place called Howard Brown. So Howard Brown in Chicago is a free clinic for HIV/AIDS patients, but there is in a part of town that is a little sketchy. And so there was this particular patient who, so this is 2003 and 4, where trans was still not, and they had to buy a lot of their hormones in the street. So this guy prostituted himself in order to do his transformation. But he had a lot of mental issues. So he would come and tell me all his sexual experiences. And so for someone who was very naive about sexual experiences, you know, I mean, I did not know anything about the BDSM. I did not know about it. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, you know, and so he wanted to see the shock factor. And I was just like, okay, tell me about it. And I would come out and going, oh my God. But you know, so I learned a lot about my patients. So that was the transition, right? So, and then friends, I always told my friends, please correct my English. I don't get offended. My written. I do have, and this is one of the fears I have, is writing. So it's very hard for me to write because it just doesn't flow. And I think it's a mental block, right? So, yeah. So those are the things.
And in fellowship, what do you think that was hard for you during the fellowship?
So the fellowship was different. So now I kind of knew my way around, right? So I had been in the big city in Chicago, and I was going to Cleveland. I drove when I was in Chicago. I didn't have a car, so I knew how to take the L, and I really enjoyed it. So then I moved to Cleveland. That was an experience for the cold weather more than anything, but I had a very supportive fellowship. I made very good friends to this day. My two co-fellows, Corey and Federico, are still my friends today. And we get together, unfortunately, only at meetings, but we do. Federico is Colombian, and now he's PD, program director for the ID. And Corey is the director of HIV clinic for Metro Health. And so we supported each other because it was the three of us against the madness of the university hospital, the VA. The VA was very supportive, Dr. Bonomo, Dr. Stiefel, they were all there. And so they basically just kind of took you under their wing, right? And if you didn't know those things, they would make it. So I made very good friends with my mentor, Barbara Gripshover. And we spent many hours talking about life, and probably too many wine was consumed and food, but it was good. So the fellowship was great. But one thing I learned from all those meetings is that I did not want to stay as faculty at Case because the environment for women, again, was not ideal. And Cleveland, if you're single, is not the greatest place to be and to go hang out. I mean, so I had to look for another place.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's very good to hear about how you overcome all those difficult times, and now you're in a great position, able to pursue your career. And we would love to know if were there any perceived bias or prejudice experienced in your career as an IMG?
Yeah, so I mean, you point out. I mean, I'm here. That tells you how old I am. 20 years into, I came to the US in 2003. So it's been 18 years or 19 years. What you see is the tip of the iceberg, right? The underneath, there was a lot of stuff, a lot of struggles and a lot of things. Biases, I have them all the time. Even here at Emory, there is a huge bias, and I see that between the African Americans and the Latino. There's a big, because Atlanta is a big African American rich heritage place. There is a lot of things done for the African American, and the Latino community is an afterthought, right? So that's why there are diversity and inclusions, and it is. But what has happened with the Latino communities that we're too divided. We're too different. I mean, so you have the IMGs that like us. We have the second, third generation, like my PD, so that was a microaggression or a full-bladed aggression and bias, right? Because my parents did not cross the Rio Grande and didn't go pick cherries. My mom was actually very offended about this, but and so we're so different, and we come from so many Latin American countries, and even in Latin America, we're not united, right? And even in our countries, we're not united. And so it makes us different. While the African American community has a tied, unfortunately, to slavery or tied to Africa, and that makes them be more united and be able to assert what they want. So today, as some of you know, is the first time we're celebrating the National Latino Physician Day. And to put it in perspective, about 20%, actually, the Latinos will be the largest minority voting in these elections, and as well as in 2 years. And if you look where the Latino population is compared to healthcare, we have a huge discrepancy, right? We have, we're 20% of the total population, but only 6% of the US physicians are Latinos who identify themselves as Latin, right? Or Latinx. And there's a whole thing about if you want to be Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, I'm not going to go into that. But when you go into academics, where it's what I do, it even goes further. There's only 309 full professors in the schools of medicine, opposed to 3,000 full professors that are Caucasians. And we lose a lot of Latinos at the time of the mid-career, like where I am. They don't make it to the next step because it's not that easy. It's hard. It's a lot of work, and you have to prove a lot of things and do a lot of check boxes. But then women actually is even less. So 3% of the faculty in medical school are Latinos, and we only have like 1% of that is women. So that's why it's a big push for me to do the Women in ID and mentor our Latina faculties and things like that, because we're losing that. And so, like, you come, you want to have someone that looks like you, right? So, understands your culture, and then our patients too. I mean, it's not the same that I talk to my patient in Spanish that I get a translator, right? So those are the things that you're going to experience, and those are the things that you'll see. So there are microaggressions. Don't be fooled by that. My microaggressions are like, it's like I either, you want to do the analogy of the mosquitoes or the death by 1,000 cuts, it wears you down. That's why you have to look for allies. That's why you bond together. You look for diversity. You want to have equity. And unfortunately, you are the one who's going to be, knocking down that little glass ceiling and saying, I'm here and I want to be heard. And sometimes it's not easy. It is not easy. There's many lows, but as I said, my mom, we come from, in Panama, we have a very strong matriarchal society. So we come, they're like, Mount Everest is there, you go climb it and you do that. So we have a lot of that, but not everybody has that. So a lot of support between us. And so, our division, for example, actually, I was counting the numbers, we're 90 total, including our 90 faculty, including our fellows. We have 2 Latino fellows, Cristina Malarino from Colombia and Carlos Saldaña from Ecuador, both IMGs. Christina's husband is actually in Alabama doing CT surgery. And so we, out of the 90, we're nine of us are Latinos. So we have one full professor, which is Carlos Del Rio. Oh, actually two full professors, Carlos and Kenneth Castro, who's from Puerto Rico. And then it's me as an associate, and then everybody else is an assistant. So knowing the numbers helps, you know.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Laila. Yeah, and as you mentioned, we are a minority in medicine, and now that the match is coming, we are also a minority among that process. So what tips would you give the IMGs that are going for the match to stand out during this process?
So I would talk about the cultural heritage that you're coming and how you're going to be able to help bridge that gap of health inequities. So that also goes where you are going to go and apply, right? You're not going to apply, and even though people love Mayo, to Rochester, because there's no Latino population in Rochester. I mean, what they do have is that they have a lot of J1s, and they do have a lot of, they take a lot of people from there. But if you're going to talk about your cultural heritage and things, people in Rochester are not going to care about that, right? I mean, it's just that. So that's why you look for places that are rich in Hispanic, Latino culture. The other reason why you want to do that is because that's our places which can sponsor your J1 afterwards. You're looking for underserved areas. So areas in Texas, Arizona, where there's not a lot of Latino doctors, but you have a large Latino populations, are places where you can go. Being bilingual or trilingual is an advantage. Knowing how cultural and becoming empathetic is another advantage. Your clinical skills are superb. Your clinical skills are nothing compared to what a medical student here does. The medical student here doesn't learn their medical skill, doesn't learn their physical skills until they are residents. What you can diagnose and what it is the gamma of clinical diagnosis and things that you've done. It is more. What you end up learning here, and is what I learned, is the basics, is the fundamentals, how to teach, the Socratic method, how to go from point A to point B, how do you utilize the technology that you have here that you don't have in our countries, right? So you highlight clinician, education, cultural, and bilingual.
Thank you, Dr. Laila. I really appreciate your answers. I like when an IMG can say the truth, not just saying like, okay, move to US is just like living in Disneyland or something like that. And how today you said that it's the Latinx Day. How do you think the institution and organizations can support the Latin community in medicine?
So one is being aware. Representation matters. Having strong role models. So Monica Verduzco Gutierrez, she's a second generation Mexican American. She is a PM&R. She is chair of PM&R in UT San Antonio. Dumas, Flores, because she now got married, so it's now Dumas Flores. She started Latinas in Medicine, Pinzon. There's Mola in Chicago, trying to work together. And that is going to do, for example, University of Chicago, and I'm going to do, this is going to be my advertisement. On Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time, we have leadership, mentorship, and promotion of Latino healthcare professionals. That is a panel with Lilian Abo, who's an associate chief medical officer at University of Miami. Monica Vela, who is a professor, director of Hispanic Center of Excellence, myself, and Max Brito, who is professor of Illinois College. So we're going to talk about how can we promote Latinos in healthcare? How can we do this? And so one of this is mentoring. And it actually comes from where I stand, you know. How can I promote? So right now I have three, so I have three assistant, no, let's see, one associate and two assistant professors, they're all women. And there is an assistant professor, but I'm sorry, he's from Brazil, but he has, like, you know, he's a little difficult to to manage. He's a little too full of himself. Sorry, Rafa. It's just anyways, but what I'm doing is promoting. So, you know, like if I have a talk, if I put their names up, and so I put their names up for the RISE, which is our diversity inclusion council, so they could be there and represent. Same thing with Christina and Carlos. Carlos does a lot of work with the LGBTQ2+A community, and so helping him how to promote yourself and how to be okay, and sometimes just to listen, because life can be hard, right? And then you know, writing letters of recommendations, helping people come up. We're also trying to include more researchers. So in our research studies, you know, looking at that, because we need to enroll more Latinos in research studies. So we need people that speak their languages, you know, in order to do that. So that's the way to do it. Is actually start utilizing what you have earned during, this is paying it back, right? Or paying it forward. What you have like struggled for the last, you know, 15, 20 years, and it's how to make it better for you guys.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for sharing your stories, and I want to congratulate you on the Latino Physician Day, and your story is really inspiring us. So I want to know, how do you recommend us as IMG strengthen our path and, you know, get on the steps of, you know, getting, you know, matched and being on the right path? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so you know, so when I applied, you know, having good step scores was kind of the right thing to do. Things have changed. The area has become more competitive. So I can tell you what. So first of all, if you want to take the ranking by the U.S. News, which we do, even though they're kind of skewed. It is divided by quartiles. So Emory, as well as Baylor, ended up on the top in the first quartile, so the first 25. And that means, and then you have the top 10, which are going to be the Ivy League schools, Harvard, Hopkins, you know, places like that, Penn. And so that is actually sometimes harder for us to get in. One, because the scores that you need have to be high. I mean, in the 50s, not just pass, but you have to in the 50s and the 60s. You have to be on the top of your class. So that's the first cutoff, right? As an IMG, that's the first cutoff. The first cutoff, they do it is electronically. When you submit everything to ERAS, the PD or the associate PDs, they said, we're going to take everybody who is an IMG, but I want their scores to be above this. And that's the first cut. Because with ERAS now, instead of, you know, we get 4,000, you know, 4,000. So for the fellowship, we have 5 spots. We got 800 applications. Because it's easy, right? You don't have to write, you know, 30 different personal statements. You just write one and ERAS distributes it, right? You just have to pay for that. So the first cutoff is that. And then there is, there's always a diamond on the rough. So you do the cut, and then you say, well, I need to, enhance my diversity. So they look at African Americans, they look at Latinos, Indigenous people, and Asian Pacific, right? And then the other cutoff is where you rank in your class. So if you're in the, so if you're in the top quartile, that gives you a part, So that's for us. I mean, I'm just letting you know how the top quartile does it, right? Then you look at your publications, your citizenship, right? So it's not the same to be 256, 263, but you never publish anything. The only thing you did in medical school was be a good student. That's not good enough anymore because we're competing. I mean, the people coming from Africa and India, they have MPHs, they have publications, they open an NGO, they walk on water. If I had to apply again, I would never get in. So, I mean, and this is not to scare you, but you're asking me what you can do to enhance it. So one of the things is try to either do leadership positions, found something, do volunteer work, go the research route. The CP solvers is a great part to get there. And then shine during your clerkships. Your clerkships is the best time, not just because you're going to get a letter of recommendation, but it's the best time to put a foot forward. So everybody likes to go to Harvard, go to the big places, go to a place that you really want to go. That is, realistic. You can always shoot high, but there's the realistic part, right? Your solid plan that you're going to have. If you get this, you're like, yay, but you need a solid plan to get in, right? And then, so for example, when I did the pre-match, the reason I got the pre-match is because the program director asked me to manage a patient. And I just said, well, I would do this, I would do that, I would give this antibiotic, it's like what I do now. And they're like, oh, okay, can you start? I'm like, sure. But that's the reason.
That's nice.
So that happens. So what you want to do is we look at academics. You want to be a Renaissance person. You want to be kind of worldly. So you either excel on some artistic, something else as a hobby. You do some leadership, your publications, your involvement, things like that. And then your clerkship. Trying to present at ACP, presenting at meetings, sometimes it's easier coming from low middle income countries than coming from here. It's a great place to meet people. One of the persons that I recommended, who is an ID physician now, he brought a poster for ID Week that was back in 2000, I don't know, 2008. And I knew he was coming because I always peruse the papers and see who's coming from Guatemala. And I liked the title, what he had, and I thought that the study looked good. I walked by, looked at the study, asked some questions, and I said, let me get someone. And so I went to look for Dr. Bonomo because I was at Case, and I said, this is the person who's going to be working at your lab. So he offered Roberto to come to do like a month with him in the lab. And then that's how he ended up doing internal medicine at Montefiore and then going to Case for infectious disease. So sponsorship, right? But you have to do that before you apply. It doesn't help me when you apply. Because once the papers are in, my hands are tied. I can't. If you apply to Emory, I can't give you feedback because I'm in the search committee.
Thank you very much.
What else you guys want to know? I mean, I know it sounds scary, but it's not that scary.
We actually have one last question from Vale. Vale, are you in a place to ask the question?
Yes, sorry. So just kind of I guess looking back, what advice would you give to your younger self as in your IMG journey?
actually, I enjoy my journey. I don't think I would change it. You know, there's always parts where you, like you said, maybe I should have gotten a better score, but everything led me to where I am today, right? Maybe if I play, you know, alternate universes, maybe it's different. If I'm Doctor Strange in different worlds or something like that, then it would be okay. But who I am today is because of the struggles I have. You know, I mean, what if I don't know, let's say you know, instead of going to Guatemala, I've gone to Panama, go to Mexico, maybe I would have not done medicine, you know, so I think I understand more the journey and the challenges and even the bittersweet moments and everything, because it gives you the experience to be able to tell it to you guys, right? I mean, I have zero regrets. I mean, maybe there's some regrets and things like I should have, you know, probably run more or something like that, you know. But I enjoy life and I like traveling. You know, I like what I do. I love seeing my patients. I mean, I'm happy at time that I can teach, and that's probably why I also left Baylor, because I was having less time to do medical education, and I wasn't having time with my patients. I was doing too much administrative work, which is it eats your soul. I mean, some people like it. It wasn't for me.
Thank you so much.
Multiverse madness. Yes, the madness. Yeah, the eras and the ECFMG. You know, I mean, I mean, I remember that, and I mean, I had to do the, you know, I had to go to Philadelphia to take the exam. That was the only place that I could take the exam. And I mean, it sounds like a lot of work at this moment, and you have your ups and downs, but you have to keep, like I tell a friend, eyes on the prize. What's your prize? What's your goal? You keep going, right? Now, I do want to say, and I seen this in, there are some scores, some people that don't score well on the steps. And I think it's hardest part there is because you either don't understand how to take the multiple choice questions, which it is a big challenge. Because if you can't take the multiple choice questions, you are not going to be certified to be an internist, because you will perpetually take multiple choice questions. And that's something I learned, because I hate taking exams. I get PTSD and all these things, but I learned how to take questions because I needed to do that. It doesn't prove me I'm a better physician or worse physician. It just gives me the certificate that I need to practice. So it's an ends to a means, or means to an end. So I would say, you know, I mean, the ones that I have the hardest part to counsel are those IMGs who have applied 3 times or 4 times, but their scores are barely there. I mean, and when I mean barely there, it means like if the cutoff is 197, they got 198. It is going to be very hard for a program to take a 198. Even in the low quartile. So that's when I say, look at things like family medicine, because it's not that it's worse, it's just that their standards are not as high as internal medicine, and it's easier sometimes. But if you have applied 3 or 4 times to internal medicine, it's not going to happen. And that is probably the hardest thing that I have to do sometimes. To tell someone, this is not going to happen. Let's look for an alternative. And maybe that's not what you want to hear. But you're not going to continue wasting your money if it's not going to happen. This is like beating yourself. This is what the saying of beating a dead horse, right? So time passes. And as time passes, it's harder to get, right? So that is probably the hardest advice sometimes, is to tell someone you're not going to make it. Not because you're not able, it's just because the scores are not there.
So Dr. Laila, on behalf of everyone here, on behalf of the City Silvers, we just want to thank you for taking your time to be with us, to give your incredible input. And you're such a force in the IMG community in the US, and it's just a privilege to have you here with us.
No,
Thank
it's a
you so
privilege to
much.
be with you guys. And don't
Thank
be
you,
scared,
everyone.
apply, and if you have any questions, email me or we can set up. Another thing I would say, and we were talking with this earlier before everybody joined, is that if you got interviews, schedule a mock interview. Try to do mock interviews. You want to go, depending on the timing and everything, I'm more than happy to help you with that. Maybe not everybody, but some of you, I can do that. I do have a day job, but having just go through a mock interview helps a lot.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you, everyone. Hope everyone have a very good weekend. And thank you once again, Dr. Laila. See you guys. Bye.